Project Nation. It's John here. It's January again. And you know what that means? It means it's time for another horror movie. Oh, hold on a second. I'm reviewing this in the dark so that the spirits can join. Oh shit, that was bad. Anyhow, I'm gonna turn the lights off. And turn off this. Insidious: The Last Key, the fourth installment of the Insidious franchise. A little strange that it's coming out now, because it was originally supposed to come out last year during the Halloween season, and then it got pushed back, I think, so that they could put out Happy Death Day instead, which makes sense. And for me, it's nice to have something to look forward to of this style in January. Start off the year with something I love. But before I hop into my thoughts on the new movie, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our video sponsor, Stardust. You've heard about them. You know their name. Go check us out over there. It's a great app that basically allows you to make 30-second reviews, first impressions, etc. for any film, TV show, or trailer that's out there. It's pretty fun, and it's a great way to see what everybody's thinking, see what the real people are thinking. If you don't want to just check out Rotten Tomatoes, it's like a capsule review, but from everybody. And a lot of your favorite YouTubers are on there, so go check that out. Follow us first as well. Make sure to do that so they know we sent you. Actually, here, I'll play right now my review for the first 3 Insidious films from Stardust, just so you guys can get a sense for how I feel about, these movies. I remember when I first saw Insidious, man, I really love this movie, and especially coming in as a Saw fan, to see Leigh Whannell and James Wan do something that's completely the opposite, completely unreliant on blood, and that takes on the haunted house movie tropes, and bothers to make better choices with them, I think is great. The cast is awesome, the music is really wacky and shrill and foreboding, and it's got some good imagination. While it is a love letter to Poltergeist, I think it does bring its own funhouse vibe, and it's really intense. Insidious Chapter 2. Not as tight as the first movie, I will give you, and some might argue that it's not entirely essential. However, I do think that, again, James Wan and Leigh Whannell were not lazy about this. They really tied it into the family and really bothered to wrap up their story, and I like that they love letter a different vibe entirely, going from more like The Shining and stuff like that than Poltergeist with this one. And yeah, it does go even crazier with its funhouse vibe, but I think that works. It's fun. So this one's Leigh Whannell's directorial debut, and while it's not without its flaws, I do think he has a pretty good grip on the horror elements, the scares and whatnot, and I like that this movie makes concerted effort to focus on and to really walk around in the traumas and the struggles of the leads, especially Quinn, the young woman who's the focus of this story, the focus of the haunting, and her loss of her mother. Lynn Shay is terrific as always. Tucker and Specs are a lot of fun. It's got all the Insidious earmarks, but with its own flair, and overall I think it's pretty good. Yep, so those are my thoughts overall. You can tell I'm a fan of Insidious. I've enjoyed pretty much all the movies for different reasons. Not that I think they haven't, had flaws along the way. I think the first one's definitely the most solid. And going into this fourth one, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. I think I only ended up seeing the one trailer that we did the reaction to, and I was sort of surprised that they moved it to January. I think they were gearing up for Halloween time, a fall release of some kind. And I thought one of two things at that moment. I thought, on the one hand, Blumhouse has sort of done really well lately in the first part of the year. Split came out in January, Get Out came out in February. It seems like maybe they're carving out a niche, and for people like me, that's a nice thing to be able to look forward to a horror movie at the start of the year, especially something of caliber in any capacity. But on the other hand, it also kind of made me worry, just because this is one of their flagship franchises. I'm curious as to why they would bump it there. And ultimately, with all that, I went in sort of cold, because I had forgotten it was coming out until, shouts out to Wendy Lee over at the Movie Couple and Collider. She hit me up and that reminded me, and then I got excited. So basically the main gist of this movie is focused in on Elise now, and she gets another call from someone who needs help with a haunting, but this time it's not just any old haunted house, it is her childhood home in Five Keys, New Mexico. So Elise literally has to go back and confront the demons of her past in order to help out with this situation. This is also another prequel. It takes place before the events of the original Insidious. If you've seen that movie, the reasons why are pretty obvious. But one of the first things that struck me about this movie, and what I appreciated the most about this movie, is that in moving forward, they've really taken the person personal elements of this franchise and dialed them up, because early on this movie makes it clear that this is mostly about Elise. Even the malevolent forces she's called to deal with are intrinsically tied to her past in a way that doesn't feel, or at least to me didn't feel, cheesy the way it so often does. The prologue of this movie is surprisingly raw and natural. That's the first impression the movie makes on you, is that this is going to be about Elise and this is going to deal with the traumas and struggles of her past growing up. You see, she grew up in a really dysfunctional family, and her gift was not viewed that way by everybody. And so much of the action of this movie directly involves her confronting and dealing with her own demons as well as the physical demons on screen. So that's a cool thing. Like, right off the bat, I feel like this movie's doing some work that your average haunted house movie might not do. And that's been in the DNA of Insidious from the get-go. Like, it's always partly about challenging the tropes of these movies. And in some ways, I think in adjusting the themes and the focus on certain elements, they've managed to adapt and to oddly subtly build a franchise out of this. And I love that it's Lin Shaye's franchise, at least at this moment. I mean, out of that seed planted in the first movie, when she comes in partway through, she's the cool, intriguing, supporting character, and now she is the heart and soul of this franchise. And I mean, Lin Shaye is like in her 70s, but she kills it in this movie. I just think it's so cool that she gets to lead this, and she does a terrific job. And that's also where Adam Robitel comes in. The director they got to do this also did a movie called The Taking of Deborah Logan, which is sort of a twist on found footage, but that takes its supernatural elements from a very real situation, which is, Hush, and it's exploring that with a horror sort of metaphor. And this movie does something similar with Elise, both in the fact that they focus on developing that character and they focus in on her past and some of the tough decisions she made growing up, but they also focus in on her with the camera. They choose a lot of long lenses. There's a lot of shallow focus. You really get to focus on Elise's face or her body language. It's surprisingly intimate in that way, which makes this a little more of a film than I was expecting. Truly, like, the center of this movie is Elise, and I think that's a really cool thing for them to do with this, and it makes the most sense for a franchise. She's gonna be involved with a revolving door of spooky experiences. It makes sense. Tucker and Specs are also back for this movie. I enjoy them. I know some people don't, and I get why. The comedy isn't always 100%, but I do think that their dynamic as a trio is oddly perfect, because they're always off in their own world, and they really are man-children, and she feels like their mom. And even their story gets updated a little bit in this new sequel. Every time they show up, they're a little bit different. Their gadgets and stuff contribute to the style of the movie. There are some really cool audio passages where the sound quality is different. There's some cool visual passages that are kind of like found footage in some ways. There's a lot of use of color and cool lighting. I think Adam Robitel really brought a lot to the table with this, and I think Lee Whannell's script too, because he's written all these movies, does a good job of, again, not being lazy, exploring some of the crucial characters, and also bringing in some cool new ones. And I guess the only big thing I would complain about with this movie is that there are times when it starts to feel choppy, where certain scenes will feel more written or more richly written than other scenes will. There are some moments that just feel like, we gotta move the plot along, or, we gotta remind people of the important information we learned. So I wish some of those had either been more fleshed out, or maybe they'd given us a little more credit for paying attention. Each of these movies has its own twists and turns, and there are a lot of different genres they're drawing from. And there are times during this movie where plot developments will hit, and at least for me, would be kind of jarring. And that's not entirely to the movie's detriment, because by the end, I feel like it does pay off and at least attempt to justify everything that it brings up, but at the same time there are moments that hit and you're like, whoa, what happened? Hold on, I'm missing new details because I'm trying to swallow that last one. And these movies have always flirted with that line. I feel like that's part of the happy byproduct of the funhouse approach, is that they are free to get a little zany sometimes, and for me, I feel like that's just a matter of where your zaniness scale is, because like moments in the third movie sort of pushed me for that, but this one didn't do it as much, and I appreciated that. Again, they've built this out into a franchise, and I think one of the smartest things they've done with that is really focus in on the family aspect. And it's funny that James Wan also has The Conjuring, because both of these franchises rest the spookier elements and the ghost story stuff on top of the emotional lives of their characters to some extent, and they make a concerted effort towards that, into making the human stories at least resonant. And even the third Insidious movie marked, I thought, a more direct shift toward making that a focus of these. Like, you really get to know Quinn in that movie, you get to know her life life and her struggles and the peril that her spirit is in. And that is something that I think is key to making these movies effective when they do work. But when it comes to the scares, I feel like some of the jump scares are hit or miss. In terms of just horror movie value, there are some jump scares. Some of them are saved by the fact that even the stuff you kind of smirk at afterwards is a flash of something relevant to the story, and in that way kind of enhanced the more psychological, the more human elements of this. It does have a good sense of suspense, I feel like. There are definitely times where I curled up and was like, oh. Not necessarily as frightening as some of the original ones. But what I will say is when people are in danger or being aggressed upon by malevolent spirits, there are some moments like that that are really intense. And there are also some jump scares that you gotta give them credit for ingenuity and like creativity, because while they didn't often catch me off guard when they would show up unless they were completely out of nowhere, they did a good job of misdirecting my eyes and making me finally so dizzy I'm like, I don't know when it's coming and from where because I'm looking all over the place. And the music is different this time. Not as shrill as the previous movies, which I actually really appreciated about the earlier movies when they first came out, especially. That sort of harsh, raking string score and all that. But this one dials it back. It's still got some cool musical moments, but a lot of the scarier parts of the movie are played in room tone, silence. You're there with the characters. And that enhances the cinematography as well. And the supporting cast I thought was also good. I think the best of which was Josh Stewart and Tessa Farrer as Elise's parents growing up. I always enjoy when Josh Stewart pops up in movies like this, especially because he seems like he takes these seriously. He's the star of the Collector films as well, and I think he's really good in those. You probably seen him in some Chris Nolan movies. And Tessa Farrer, this is the first time I was aware of having seen her, but I thought she did a great job as Elise's mother. Even though those characters don't have like the vast majority of screen time, they do leave an impression, and I thought both those actors brought something to it. Bruce Davison is in this. You know, he's good. He's not in a huge role. He's an important character, but not a giant character in terms of writing or screen time. Spencer Locke and Caitlin Gerard from Zack Stone's Gonna Be Famous show up as Elisa's nieces, which is cool. This is a very family-oriented movie. It's about family. This is gonna be the Fast and Furious Ghost franchise. Pretty soon they're gonna find reasons to make all of the demons good again. Oh, yeah, that's right. They're the fantasy elements of this movie too. You're gonna have the lipstick-faced demon from the first one, the woman in black from the first and the second one. Then you're gonna have the man who couldn't breathe. And then you're gonna have Keyface with the bony key fingers and the Resident Evil Nemesis mug, you know. That was a cool element of this movie too. I like that they always have their boogeyman. And I thought this character was neat, and I actually wanted to know more about certain aspects of him and where he comes from. He's played by Javier Botet, who's, you know, the creature performer these days, just in It, and now he's in this. And the Further this time too. The movie even bothers to expand a little bit on the Further, the mythology of the Red Doors, and the glimpses into the Further you get this time are of a different aesthetic. They're more prison-like because her father's a prison warden, so there's a lot of that imagery in there. I feel like this movie bothered to touch on everything, so even when it's doing perhaps way too much at one time, everything it tries to do I feel like was worth trying. And I feel like they brought dimension of some degree, nuance of some degree to most of the things they tried to work with, even if some are more richly written than others, because there are some of those thinner or more truncated moments that do kind of jostle the flow of the movie a little bit. It may cross a point for you. I feel like this movie is going to hit everybody's threshold differently, where it's too much stuff happening. For me, it definitely flirted with that line, crossed it a few times here and there. So even though I do think this movie has a number of uneven elements, it could have used a little more finesse, perhaps more focus. It's certainly left an impression on me, at least as an Insidious fan, and as a fan of horror movies in general. It's the fourth installment of this franchise, and I appreciate that even still they are trying to think of thoughtful ways to expand this story. It doesn't all coalesce 100% of the time, but it tried so many things I thought were cool. It had a lot of surprises in it I wasn't expecting. It does seem like the core drive of this franchise is still intact. We didn't need a sequel to Insidious, but it seems like every step of the way they've thought, what's the most sensible way we can make a sequel to this while also keeping our spirit intact? And I think for the most part, they've been pretty successful, even if you're only sticking around at this point because you're a fan. If you're curious about it, I'd say go check it out. If you're a fan, I'd say definitely go check it out. There are elements of it that I think are the strongest of this franchise. I mean, Elise is as great as she's ever been, and she's something to see in this movie. I really liked that story. Right now, I guess off the top of my head, just having seen it yesterday, I'd probably go with like a 3.5 for this movie. I mean, there are some things that I would have liked to have seen smoothed out. It's not without its flaws, but I think there are definitely some things they do here that are worth appreciating and that are good, you know, for horror in general. What do you guys think? Have you seen The Last Key? Hit us up with your thoughts in the comment section, and where would you like to see Chapter 5 go if they take this another step further? into the further. And even. So anyhow, you can subscribe to The Real Rejects, hit that notification bell to get notified every time a review or a video is up. Download the Stardust app, follow us first if you please, we would very much appreciate it. And if you love us, you want to get involved with our little Patreon community, patreon.com/TheRealRejects is the place to go for that. We've got lots of fun stuff, special reactions, behind the scenes videos and pictures. You know, it's like a second YouTube channel where we can be us, man. We can be raw. So if that sounds fun to you, come check it out. Until then,